Thank you for giving me the floor. On behalf of the Women's Major Group, we would like to highlight how the systemic drivers of inequality play out in diverse ways in different contexts, and in many cases contribute to deepening and magnifying exploitation and exclusion and leaving a whole set of populations behind. Systemic drivers of inequality are contributing to new and emerging trends and challenges that will have an impact on our ability to implement the 2030 Agenda and have specific effects on women and girls. One example for this is what is happening with the Zika virus in Latin America, and especially in Brazil, where it's very clear that the greatest impact is on poor women living in neglected areas where safe water and sanitation are not a reality for them. Another example of deepening inequalities, exploitation and exclusion is the digitization of cities under the smart city focus in rapidly growing economies like China, Nigeria, India, Brazil, and South Africa, which brings risk of leaving behind newly arrived migrants, girls and women of all ages, indigenous peoples, people of color, youth and children, the elderly, the disabled, LGBT and gender non-conforming, and the historically subjugated and invisible communities who may not have access to appropriate technologies or the ability to participate on equal basis with others. How will we make sure that their voices are heard, the needs met, and the human rights fulfilled? Economic, political, and social systemic barriers to sustainable development happens within systems of institutionalized patriarchy, racism, and oppressions that maintain and reinforce intersecting structures of inequalities. Ideologies that rigidly limit opportunities, participation, and autonomy for some members of the population cause whole groups of people to be left behind. Fundamentalisms, whether cultural, religious, political, or economic, ascribe rigid beliefs about the roles and value of different groups of people. In doing so, fundamentalist beliefs commonly focus on women's bodies, sexuality, and decisions. When these ideologies shape policies and laws, women, sexually and gender diverse groups, single or unmarried women, women human rights defenders are left behind. While Goal 5 sets some important targets that measure some of the consequences of patriarchal policies, a more holistic review of the systemic causes of inequality as a review theme would allow the intersectional nature of the agenda to be interrogated. We really need to tackle the systemic barriers, and challenge the current development paradigm that has such a strong corporate influence. As state sovereignty and policy-making power has been diminished and increasingly handed to the private sector, no corresponding system to ensure regulation and accountability of the private sector has emerged. Leaving no one behind calls for accountability mechanisms and reparations for human rights violations and environmental degradations caused by unsustainable development practices such as the extractive industry. Leaving no one behind is something that will not happen only by repeating the phrase over and over within these walls. We need to see inclusive policies and actions at the local level that supports the participation of women and girls in all their diversity and women's rights organizations. Thank you.